The Black Ship Side Story, What's the Job? Chapter 26. With the capital ship and last remaining FTL-capable mercenary vessel destroyed, the precious few remaining enemy fighters stood down almost immediately now that they knew there would be no chance of escape. Some had even been destroyed as they tried to flee into the hangar before they thought the ship would jump out, only to be destroyed in the blast. This now allowed the Silent Runner to move unimpeded. A short while later, she was slowly making her way through the debris and closer to the emergency distress beacon as it wailed through the void. Having made plenty of room in the landing bay, the ship closed in on what turned out to be a heavily damaged escape pod. Kartok leaned in close to the captain and whispered, "You don't really expect anyone to be alive in that tin can, do you?" Nico took in a heavy breath. "Technically, we don't even know who, if anyone, is inside. But if it is the Princess's Royal Marines, I want you ready to take care of any injuries." The captain's doctor looked at the mangled object as it slowly began to float into the ship. "Aye, Captain. I still can't believe it even survived the blast." The escape pod drifted through the bay shield on a plume of sputtering maneuvering gas, tumbling just enough to make everyone tense. One entire side of the hull had been scorched black and peeled back like the skin of an overcooked fruit. Microfractures spider-webbed across its surface, glowing faintly where emergency field generators failed to hold the atmosphere in. Mag clamps snapped out from the deck and caught it with a heavy clang. But for a moment, nothing happened. The distress beacon cut out, power finally failing, almost as if only when it realized it had accomplished its mission. Silence settled over the bay, thick and expectant. "Pressure seal is non-functioning," Amara reported softly, her avatar flickering near the pod. The internal atmosphere would have been 0. "Life signs," she paused, recalculating twice in rapid succession. 6. "Extremely weak. Multiple critical conditions." Kartok froze. Slowly he turned to Nico. 6? Nico was already moving. "Open it. Carefully." Drones surged forward as Clara and her people stood nearby, watching anxiously for what was inside. As they approached the manual release panel, sparks showered them when they bypassed melted circuitry, their appendages moving with frantic precision. "Hatch release in 3, 2! The hatch was pulled outward early with a tortured screech of metal. Air slowly flowed into the room following the hatch, carrying with it the unmistakable scent of scorched armor, burned insulation, and blood. Inside the pod, the scene was pure devastation. Milcades was slumped in the center, still strapped into a crash harness that had partially fused to his armor. His helmet was on, but his cracked visor was streaked with dried blood and ash. His chest rose slowly, unevenly, but it did rise. Rama lay to his left, unconscious, one arm twisted at an angle no arm should ever take. His armor plating was split open along the ribs. The black ichor that was nanogel had ensured his suit remained sealed. No doubt the sole reason any of them yet lived. Vasily was half collapsed against the bulkhead, visor also damaged, one eye visible and unfocused. His leg was gone below the knee, cauterized clean by a piece of metal from the blast. But his fingers still twitched weakly against the deck. Ibanez was strapped in upside down, harness jammed. Blood coated in crimson globules around her helmet. A deep fracture was visible along the collar of her armor where the blast had thrown her into the pod's ceiling, leaving her wedged there. Lamar was breathing, but only because the pod's internal med unit had punctured his chest plate and was rhythmically forcing air into his lungs. Every assisted breath made his body jerk. Sandra lay motionless near the hatch, her armor burned through in multiple places. One gauntlet with a hand was missing entirely. A faint pulse blinked on her collar indicator, red but present. For half a second, no one spoke. Then Kartok swore softly in his native tongue as he pushed forward to see their condition for himself. "Med teams, move!" Nico barked, the command snapping the bay back into motion. "Now! Get them out!" "Careful with Milcades's spine," Kartok ordered after seeing a scan report. "Amara, full trauma protocols route them straight to surgery." As stretchers slid in and autoclamps disengaged restraints, Milcades's eyes fluttered. Barely open. His gaze drifted unfocused across the bay lights, the silhouettes rushing around him, until they landed on Clara. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to just the two of them. "Princess," he rasped while trying to give a salute. The word itself was almost lost as the pain of speaking caused him to cough. Clara's breath caught sharply. She was moving before anyone could stop her, dropping to her knees beside the stretcher as Kartok attempted to stabilize his vitals. "You," her voice broke. She swallowed hard while gently lowering his hand down to his side. "You're not allowed to speak. Just get better," she finally ordered as tears of joy softly fell from her eyes. While Atuccio, Amalia, and a host of security drones kept an eye on Harry and Clara, Cynthia and Wyatt approached, shooing away the drone stretcher-bearers to pick up and carry Milcades themselves. "You might also want to lay off the ration bars, Milcades," she said after hoisting him up in the air again. "No kidding." "You're getting fat," Wyatt jabbed lightly and awkwardly. "Nonsense! You're getting weak," he coughed a laugh, drawing a displeased look from Clara. "Shush, you, all of you! He needs to rest," the princess demanded. "Yes, my princess," they all said in unison before quickly departing to escape her ire, but also allowing Clara to finally turn away to see to her other Royal Marines as they were pulled out of the wreckage and sent to the medbay for immediate medical care one by one. As the minutes passed and the last Royal Marine was indeed whisked away, Nico approached next to Clara. "I'm sorry you didn't get your ship." Clara huffed a small laugh, not looking at him, but keeping her gaze fixed on her Royal Marines as they disappeared from the room. "It's all well and good, my dear Captain. I didn't lose anyone irreplaceable." She then turned to the mercenary captain with a faint smile. "And I regained so much more than a single ship could ever hope to provide." Nico tilted his head at her curiously, but allowed a small smile to grace his features as well, despite his lingering wariness. Just then, Amara appeared before the pair. "Captain, Your Highness," the artificial intelligence said with a slightly awkward bow. "You are receiving an incoming transmission." Nico narrowed his eyes. "From your previous employer," she answered quickly with a playful grin. "Ah," he replied, sounding pleased before turning to Clara after another moment's thought. "Would you care to join me?" he asked, extending his hand to escort her. "I have a feeling you might want to say a few things as well." "Yes?" Clara's eyes darkened even as an almost evil grin spread across her face. "Indeed I would." "That would be delightful," she said, taking Nico's offered hand. "Actually, would you mind it terribly if everyone came with us?" she asked, gesturing to her cousins and the Staples. "I think we might have an opportunity here." "I don't see why not," Nico answered, now curious what the blonde princess could be up to. And with that, they were all off. As they walked to the comm room, Amara sounded in Nico's mind. "Captain, before I was wiped from the Admiral's cruiser, I happened to stumble across an interesting communique from Duchess Sylvia to Admiral Harry about you while I was sifting through their data looking for any helpful intelligence. You will probably want to hear it before we open communications with her." "Perfect! Patch it through," the captain said wordlessly through his implant. As the information was uploaded, processed, and understood in nearly an instant, his eyes widened before he cast as casual a glance back as he could to a rather downtrodden-looking Harry, who was being escorted behind them. Sensing the shift in mood, Clara turned to him and silently asked, "What is it? What has happened now?" she asked, following his gaze to make it seem as if that was what drew her attention. Returning his focus to where he was going, Nico huffed. "Nothing." Clara raised a dubious eyebrow. "Nothing? That didn't look like nothing, my dear Captain." He sighed tiredly. "Well, nothing of any actual relevance anymore, anyway." Turning to see her still giving him a questioning look, he held up a placating hand. "I'll explain shortly. Let's just see what your aunt has to say. Please, I just ask you to stay out of the visuals when I first open the channel. Agreed?" "Very well," Clara spoke almost cheerily, as if reveling in the prospects of the conversation to come, even if she was curious as to what he wasn't saying. The moment they entered the comm room, Clara and her entourage were rejoined by Wyatt and Cynthia. They all moved to the side and out of view, while Nico activated the system after donning his helmet, before calling up Duchess Sylvia Emerald. When her image appeared, Nico gave a small, fake bow of respect. "Greetings, Duchess. I understand you wish to speak with me?" "Yes, Captain. My son, Admiral Harry, has not reported in since you handed over my niece and the others to his care. You wouldn't happen to know anything about such a concerning delay, would you?" she asked in a barely masked, yet still neutral tone. "Why, yes, I would indeed," Nico replied with a chuckle. "He is currently indisposed at the moment." "What is that supposed to mean?" "Tell me this instant and stop playing games," Sylvia demanded more angrily. "If you wish to have any chance of collecting on the second half of our deal, that is." "Of course, Duchess." The man smiled widely behind his helmet. "He is currently a prisoner of war aboard my ship." Sylvia's eyes opened wide as she clenched her jaws tightly. "You insubordinate liar!" Nico snorted at her response and simply continued. "And the reason you can't raise him on his ship? His accompanying mercenary fleet has been destroyed, down to the last vessel." "Another lie!" the Duchess growled. That's impossible. Even if you have betrayed me and joined with my niece, there is no possible way you could have overwhelmed that fleet. And I saw you hand them over to my guards. How could you possibly have overwhelmed them also? Well, since you don't believe me... He stopped and shifted to turn his whole body to the side. Placing a respectful hand over his chest, he gave a theatrical bow as he held out a hand for Clara to approach. Your Majesty? Being most amused by the games Nico was playing, Clara decided nothing else would do than to play along. Approaching the captain with as much grace and poise as was physically possible, she gently took Nico's hand before turning to face the monitor with a condescending look. My dearest aunt, I wish I could say it was a pleasure to see you. Do you believe it now? Sylvia's breathing was visibly becoming more labored as she tried to work through what she was seeing and hearing. Her eyes flicked from the princess back to the captain, who was standing once more and looking at her. But we... Had a deal? Nico interrupted. Yes. About that. I wanted to ask you about a communique I had intercepted from your flagship. It distressed me greatly, so I wondered if you might illuminate me further on this apparent misunderstanding. He then proceeded to play the recording of her talking with her son and explaining that his orders were to bring Nico and his crew in so they could be assassinated after reaching the Emerald Capital World and out of view of the other mercenaries as their reward. As the recording came to a close, Nico took in a breath through gritted teeth. Now I asked myself something similar. How can this be? We had a deal. A deep chuckle rumbled from his chest. And you then want to sit there acting like you have some moral high ground? Come now. This is beneath you, Duchess. Sylvia's gaze hardened as rage filled her very being. And yet she refused to speak any further with her traitorous captain. Her eyes shifted toward her niece instead. If you actually possess my son, how much do you seek for ransom? How about a simple exchange? Clara started pleasantly. I'll return my cousin, your son, for my brother, Sylvia scoffed. My darling Clara, you can't be serious. Clara gave a simple shrug. And why not? I assume you would be most distressed to have your son shackled so disgracefully. And the news of you attacking your own niece in neutral space? My goodness, the shame of it all. It seems hiding your shame while returning my dear cousin Harry would be fair. After all, who now would want to align with such dishonorable disgrace to the principality? Sylvia's eyes narrowed as her scowl deepened. Her answer came without hesitation. Keep him! I have other sons and can produce more if needed. Alexander's value is worth 1,000,000 Harrys, she shot back defiantly, tossing her nose higher in the air. It was this moment that Clara had been waiting for. With a thought, Cynthia and Wyatt forcefully dragged a disheveled Harry into view for Sylvia to see. What she beheld was her child looking at her with all the hurt a son could hold after hearing he was being held in such low regard and worth by his own mother. Mother? Harry asked, too shocked to really say anything else. The Duchess pursed her lips after realizing Harry had been held present to hear her comments. Harry, you have proven yourself to be useless as usual, she spat, disappointed. Without another word, Sylvia cut off the channel, disappearing from the screen. With another thought, Wyatt and Cynthia hauled the young admiral away to be handed off to security drones waiting outside. All the while, Harry continued to repeat his question in a whimpering manner. Ouch. That was a little harsh, Nico chuckled in a whispered tone. I almost feel sorry for him. Did you really need to bring Harry over for that? Of course, Nico. Divide and conquer, Clara said after her cousin was out of earshot, and terribly pleased with the whole situation. Now he knows what his house and, most importantly, his mother truly thinks of him. And if my aunt wishes to try and divide the royal family, well, two can play at that game. She then let slip a small, teasing grin. And well played yourself. When did you become one for the theatrics? Nico simply shrugged. You learn a thing or two when keeping the varied company we tend to carry around. The princess nodded. I see. So, shall we finish up here? Nico nodded. Yes. Let's. Pulling his helmet off, he gestured for his crew to join him on his side of the room. As Myra, Ada, Kartok, and even Amara all drifted toward or appeared by his side, Wyatt and Cynthia moved to flank Clara. Meanwhile, the Royal Marines approached from behind, while the Staples and Gabriel moved off to the left to watch what was happening. We had a few personal matters we wished to rectify, my crew and I, Nico started. This issue we have of kidnapping Wyatt's family. That was not the sort of job we normally take on by matter of principle. As such, we will not be accepting a single credit for it. Instead, we wish to declare our intention to divide the 90 million credits we received equally amongst them and offer it as compensation for their—" He paused for a moment to nurse his tender nose as he allowed a grin to form. "Pain and suffering. So as soon as you provide us with accounts to make the transfer, each of you shall receive the sum of 18 million credits each." While the declaration brought a series of gasps and shocked looks from all the guests present and satisfied smiles from the SR crew, Nico continued. "Next, and with the approval of your majesty," he said, gesturing to Clara, "we would like to state that we have grown fond of the Staples family in general." With his eyes drifting to Wyatt, "As such, we do not wish something like this to happen again. So I wish to sponsor Wirt, Winona, Weskel, and Wham's ascension to knighthood. In this way, both they and your brothers will also be part of the nobility and be able to take advantage of the rights, privileges, and protections their new ranks demand. You can even fully and properly adopt them into House Staples as house members, not mere favored servants." Finally, turning his gaze to Clara, he tilted his head curiously. "Would this be acceptable, Princess?" Clara's eyes flitted to a dumbfounded Wyatt for a moment before returning. Her smile widened and she nodded. "I believe this can be managed. And I thank you for your kindness toward my Knight Banneret's relations." "Splendid. I will send the credits for that as well, so they can officially become vassals under House Staples. And finally," the captain said, shifting back toward Wyatt, "with your permission, sir, I noticed you have a town and an industry you are trying to develop. I would like to assist you and your people by investing 25 million credits into your enterprises." Up till now, Wyatt had been experiencing a wide range of emotions. For the first time in over a month, he had finally gotten to meet and see the face of the man who snatched his family from their homes like a thief in the night. And yet instead of getting to punish him, or better yet, kill him, he was forced to fight alongside him. Even after watching the captain give his brother a pistol for his protection, and before watching his own mother step in and stop him from dropping the man with his soul snatchers, he couldn't understand what was happening. Could this Nico Sark actually be trusted? A sellsword? But then, Wyatt thought, this was also the man who just refused any payment for his deeds, then used the funds to uplift every single one of his family members, something he himself could not hope to do at the present moment. He watched him stop Cynthia from charging into a room that possibly could have seen even her cut down, or at the very least severely wounded. Then there was the fact that he had just risked his life alongside him to not only save his princess and her fleet, but also capture an important asset to help their war effort. "Why?" was all he could think to say as he eyed the man suspiciously. Nico shrugged nonchalantly. "I told you before, Wyatt. I'm a great admirer of your work and exploits. My goals never had anything to do with you or your family, though I'm less pleased to see you decided to try and not take my advice." A confused frown adorned Wyatt's expression, causing Nico to let a small chortle escape his lips. "It almost seems as though you were trying to get yourself killed," he finished in a whispered tone, gesturing with his eyes to his limbs. Wyatt huffed. "Anyway," Nico said while he offered a hand to shake. "What say you? Truce?" Seeing the outstretched hand this noble offered him, Wyatt slumped his shoulders a touch as he narrowed his eyes at the man. Finally, he reached out and shook it. "Fine. This doesn't make us friends, but I'll be happy to take your money." Nico barked a laugh as they shook hands, ending it with a smirk as the two bruised and battered men continued to stare at one another. With a nod, he continued, "Of course not. This is just business." The captain released his hand and chuckled. "So," Wirt interjected as carefully as he could, a confused look still adorning his face since Nico's initial announcement. "This means we'll actually all be nobles?" Nico nodded. "As soon as it is approved and the red tape taken care of, yes, all the Staples will be elevated to nobility." The former abductees looked at each other, still shocked by the turn of events. So much so that almost in unison, all the Staples men outside of Wyatt collapsed. Kartok looked shocked and was about to jump into action when he saw a grinning Ada hold out a hand, stopping him while looking heavenward as if for strength. Myra sighed and ran a hand down her face. "I'll go get the water." "Oh, right. This is normal," the medic said, shaking his head. The captain laughed softly and shifted back toward a bewildered-looking Wyatt, who quietly now wondered how they would know about this quirk of his family. "Like I said, just send me the details and we'll get everything sorted." Not waiting for a response and turning to Clara, he continued, "In the meantime, Princess, I'll get you and your people back to your ship. Give me a few hours to stabilize your Royal Marines. Then I'll transfer them to your infirmary." "I'd be much obliged, Captain." "Thank you," she said simply. With a nod and then a bit of conversation, the group broke up after the Staples had been revived and eventually headed back to the docking tube near the landing bay. Nico eventually came near to Westcall and spoke in a hushed tone. "You know, we could always use another hand on the crew." The comment caused Westcall to snap his attention to the captain instantly as his mouth fell open in surprise. You want me to stay?" Nico shrugged and smiled. "Aye, if you like." "Nobody is forcing you," he chuckled. "Just saying there is a place here for you if you want it." Westcall frowned and turned his attention to the floor as he thought. But he couldn't finish the sentence and soon found himself letting out a deep, long, contemplative breath through his nose. His mind raced through the last short while that he had been on board the ship, how his life had changed so dramatically from the same old routine of life back on Volantis. Part of him wanted to jump at the chance for excitement and adventure, but another part of him longed for the return of that quiet, simpler life. He turned back and looked at the man who had first kidnapped him, but then spent hours and hours training him, then elevating him. Part of me wants to say yes. "But I don't think I can," Westcall finally said with a small shake of his head. Nico sighed but nodded. "I get it. If you ever change your mind, or even have need of us, contact me," he finished, handing him a contact chit. However, being the forever nosy younger brother, Wham couldn't help but accidentally listen in on purpose. Hearing where the conversation was going, he butted in loudly. "Hey, I wouldn't mind. Can I join the crew?" he asked eagerly. Nico snapped his attention first to Wham, then to his parents, who looked like they were about to have a stroke. Quickly moving to smooth over the situation, he chuckled and tried to say as kindly as he could manage, "You're too young to join my crew, Wham." "Aw, come on. Wyatt joined the Navy at 14. I'm 15, Wham whined. "What was all the training for?" Nico, trying to keep from smirking, turned to face the young Staple. Placing a heavy hand on his shoulder, the captain turned the boy around and pointed to his mother. "You see that face? That is the face that tells me you won't make 16 if I say yes. And for my part, I'd like to make 25. He laughed and turned back around as he then heard Myra in his mind. "Thank you, Captain. He's a sweet boy, but I'm not sure my leg could survive the little hound's attempts at attention much longer." To keep from bursting out laughing, Nico coughed, drawing a few confused glances as he simply moved on, ignoring them all. Walking further on, Clara gently signaled him over as the walk brought him closer. While they appeared to move quietly, she reached out to him through their implants. "Nico, I wanted to thank you for what you did today." "I know how hard it must have been for you," she said with a soft, tentative smile cast his way. The fact that Nico was walking so close to the princess as an ally was still quite surreal for him. For years, his only desire had been to separate her head from her body, or shower her in a hailstorm of bullets. Probably both. But even now that they had buried the proverbial hatchet, he still couldn't help but feel slightly uncomfortable in her presence. Still, he offered a small nod by way of a response. "I don't suppose you would know where my brother's remains are, or if they were even given the courtesy of an urn." Clara sighed heavily as her gaze lowered. "Yes, I know where they are. My father suggested that they, the other children and the babies, receive the mercy of their ashes being saved. The concession was granted." There was a long, heavy moment of silence as Nico waited for her to continue, not really feeling he needed to ask more specifically. "They are on Astoria. I had a modest, private memorial spot made for them," she finally admitted. "With respect, would it be possible to have them returned to me?" "Of course," Clara responded both instinctively and immediately. "As soon as we can lift the blockade of my homeworld, I will order their release to you." Nico raised an eyebrow and looked at her curiously. "Just like that? Just like that," she parroted. "In fact, if you so desire, I will have the records of their passing altered to whatever it is you desire. It'll be a lie, but only you and I will know it. We can have their names altered to Sark as well. That way they can be remembered honorably once more." The captain wasn't quite sure what to make of her answer. There was always a catch somewhere, some hidden agenda. But with no demands whatsoever, he was finding himself at a loss for words for once. Finally, he nodded. "You would do that for them?" A question that only drew a small nod from the second princess of the principality. He let out a long breath through his nose before continuing. "You know, when you gave your life to me, I only spared it for the prince's sake." Clara gave a melancholy smile while taking in a deep breath. "I know. But now, I'm just glad I did anyway. They shared a moment of silence, even as Clara allowed a small smile to grace her features before she decided to move on. Anyway, I also wanted to talk to you about your next assignment. Nico raised an eyebrow, his interest suddenly piqued. Please, continue. I'll have to have you and your crew over to the Noir Navio at some point, or we can discuss the operation in greater detail over the network if you so desire. But the, as you so charmingly say, gist of the plan is we need to know the exact location and the movements of the Drazen fleet you ran into. Once located, we will exterminate them, Clara said as matter-of-factly. The captain snapped his attention in her direction. Well, now who's being ambitious? A smirk graced her expression as she wordlessly teased. What? Don't tell me the fearless Nico, the great mercenary from beyond the Principality, is afraid of Drazan. Nico scoffed. Hardly. But even with these ships of yours and mine combined, that's going to be a tall order. I generally like the odds to be a little more heavily stacked in my favor. Or, completely stacked in my favor. What do you plan to do once we catch up with them? A full assault with just us? That remains to be seen. I'm sure my Knight Banneret would love nothing more than that, she said, smiling inwardly. For now, however, I want you and the Reaper's Eye to be our forward scouts. Track them down and report back on your findings. That we can definitely handle. And while I'm all for some thrilling heroics, you better not be too terribly far away if I get myself into some mischief. Suicidal, I'm not. Turning to her once again, he shrugged. Not usually, anyway. I think Lord Staples would be quite agitated with me if I did keep him too far away when Drazen are afoot. So fear not, my dear captain. I promise we'll be there to support you. You shan't be left in the lurch, she said as reassuringly as she could. Then, in that case, I look forward to the hunt. A shuddering of the ship as it docked with Noir Navio alerted them that it was time to leave. And just in time as they were approaching the docking tube. Amara. Has Commander Redford given us clearance to send the party over? Nico asked simply. Aye, Captain, she said, appearing next to him with a playful salute. An action that amused Clara. You'll have to let me introduce Amara to my master technician, Jincho. I feel they would get along swimmingly. Jincho? Nico asked, as both he and Amara tilted their heads curiously at one another before looking back at the princess. Indeed, she said with a grin. He's a mechanical genius and from what I gather, just as devious. Clara finished with a wink to Amara. Amara's eyes instantly lit up with interest as she snapped her head back to Nico. But before she could say anything, Nico held up a hand. Fine, but not right now. And just as quickly, her elation turned to a disappointed frown as she fell back to being quiet. As the door opened, Nico just grinned and gave a small but respectful bow, an action mimicked by Myra and more awkwardly Kartok and Ada. Safe travels, my princess. Clara returned the gesture with a small nod. We'll see you soon, Captain. And with that, Clara left the silent runner for the Noir Navio, flanked by her Royal Marines. Following closely, but stopping before he left, Gabriel allowed a small smirk to grace his expression. Nico, it's been something. The captain chuckled. Yeah, I still hate you too. A comment that drew a surprisingly genuine laugh from both men. And try not to get yourself killed in this house war. Last time I saw you, I believe you were demanding another game of cards. Isn't that right? Gabriel tried to purse his lips but couldn't help but still see the humor in it all. You really do have a good memory. And indeed, you are correct. Honor demands it. Of course, Nico agreed amiably. Till then, Lord Draymore. Be well, and send the prince my best regards. Gabriel nodded while maintaining a smirk. And you, Lord Sark. The pair of men shared another grin before Gabriel turned on his heels and marched down the tube, following Clara. Nico turned to find Ada smothering Wham and Westcall in hugs and kisses on the cheek, while Myra hugged Winona. To his surprise, even Kartok was noted to be shaking Wirt's hand. The captain quietly walked over to a somewhat apprehensive Wyatt. So, Wyatt. The Baron turned to him with a curious look, but said nothing. I was thinking. My crew will need to have some shore leave soon. Any chance you might have accommodations for the four of us for a few days? I'm guessing the fallout of this battle is going to take a bit to take care of before we can move on, Nico said with a grin. Wyatt stared at him for a second, then at his family as they said their goodbyes, then back to Nico. Well, considering you're an investor now, not sure I can really say no. Nico offered a hand and smiled. Wonderful. I'll contact you later. We'll arrange it? Arrange what, Nico? Ada asked nosily after she joined the two, just as Wyatt took the offered hand. Wyatt has agreed to let us spend some shore leave time in his barony, Nico replied nonchalantly. The feline woman's eyes widened with excitement. Has he now? Casting a playful smile as she looked at Wyatt with an almost predatory glance, she continued, And, will the great Wyatt be joining us himself? Wyatt simply shrugged, not picking up at all on any other possible meaning to the question or tone. It's possible. I was thinking about taking my family to live there. Excellent, she purred. But before anything more could be said, Wham and Westcall jumped on Wyatt by surprise, urging him to get going so they could see his ship. Everyone chuckled, and soon the Staples were all off after one final farewell. Bringing up the end of the line as they entered the docking tube, Cynthia watched after the family for a moment before stopping to turn back to Nico. I guess I'll be seeing you around, Captain. First, just call me Nico. You know better than that, he accused while brandishing a winning smile. And second, absolutely. Who knows? Maybe we can even spar again sometime, he said in a way that had her thinking there was some deeper meaning to his words. As her eyes narrowed slightly and her head tilted curiously, maybe. After all, I feel you should have a second chance to try again after that embarrassing loss on Hago. Cynthia's eyes instantly went wide as she sucked in a breath of air to start a tirade. You! But her words were cut off as Nico smashed the button to close the docking door. Amara, get us out of here before we have to deal with a one-woman assault on our ship, he ordered after cackling. Spinning around to look at his crew, the captain found himself absolutely pleased with how everything had turned out. All right, everybody. I'm giving us a few days of shore leave. Savor it. We'll have quite the assignment afterward. Myra raised an eyebrow. Oh? Why? What's the job?